He is afraid of American power. So he jollies Trump, says he's brilliant. He signed up but did not really sign up for the Board of Peace. Because while he says, yes, I'm in, he'll pay his $1 billion dues from the frozen Russian assets. So those dues are not coming anytime soon.
Putin seems to have signed up for POTUS's Board of Peace, yet is still attacking Kyiv with ballistic missiles. Is this yet another example of Putin playing Trump? And do you expect there to be any real progress in this meeting in the UAE?
Putin thus far has shown zero willingness to compromise. And Zelensky has accepted every proposal Trump has put on the table since March. But Putin does not want to annoy Trump. He is afraid of American power. So he jollies Trump, says he's brilliant. He signed up but did not really sign up for the Board of Peace. Because while he says, yes, I'm in, he'll pay his $1 billion dues from the frozen Russian assets. So those dues are not coming anytime soon. Because Putin feels he can get away with something like that with Trump. I'm sorry to say that. Over time, I think that will not work for Putin. But so far, he's done okay avoiding Trump's anger, even though he is the one blocking Trump's efforts to achieve a durable peace.
It's interesting, but as part of that durable peace, one of the things that's critical, and there's been a lot of negotiations around, are security guarantees. And this is something where President Zelensky has said he's got to a point where he feels comfortable with what the US are saying. But that was before POTUS came out with the statements saying that, at Davos, saying that he didn't think that other NATO nations would come to the US's support. Yet the only time Article 5 has been called is by the United States after 9/11, and NATO nations rallied round to a complete nation. And then last night he turns around and insults allied nations by saying that they fought a little off the front line. And there are a large number, 457 British families who would strongly disagree, having lost people in the front line, another 2,200 British troops who were severely injured. If POTUS is coming out with these sorts of statements, how can Zelensky trust anything that he says with regard to security guarantees?
Well, I understand your point. And certainly Trump unjustly characterized the actual heroic efforts of our allies in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And Trump also did not acknowledge that, in fact, the one time Article 5 was called into action was to protect the United States following the terrorist attacks on 9/11. So we see that sometimes President Trump presents ideas which he sees as helpful to whatever policy objective he has, even if those ideas don't have much connection with what actually happened. This is simply his persona. But if Trump makes a commitment on security guarantees, especially if they wind up being ratified by the Senate, and there are serious Republicans as well as Democrats in the Senate talking about this, I think the danger you point to is not zero, but I don't think it's overwhelming.
We're now coming to the end of the first month in 2026. We're coming into almost the start of the fifth year of this conflict. And, in the same time frame, the Russians during the Second World War had pushed the Germans back from just outside Moscow to just outside Berlin. Yet they've only advanced about 45 kilometers in the east in Ukraine, having lost a lot of what they took in their first few months. Where do you see things developing in Ukraine from a tactical perspective, in Russia from an operational strategic perspective, and then globally, where do you see the peace agreements going through 2026?
If you listen to the quote-unquote common wisdom, which was common but not wise, a few months ago, the Russians were grinding forward inevitably. Well, it hasn't been true. They've made some tiny, tiny gains in the last couple of months. But again, their flagship captures didn't turn out to be captures. Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. And, Berlin was a flagship capture. Pokrovsk is not a flagship capture. Now, it is true Ukraine has lots of empty spots on their lines. They could be doing better on mobilization, on drafting. But even without that, the Russian gains have been piddly and at extraordinary cost. I've seen numbers as high as 29-1 That strikes me as being over the top, but 10 to 1 not, 10 to 1 not. And again, those Russian war bloggers are talking about those types of numbers. So I think if Western policy becomes, as it should become, stronger, there'll be no Russian gains whatsoever. If it continues the way it is right now, the Russians may at best do what they're doing right now. But it's hard to imagine them making any breakthrough. It was clear some of the gains they made like 3 or 4 months ago came from changing their tactics, where they would infiltrate a few soldiers in and then have reinforcements come in behind. That way they avoided the attention of the Ukrainian drones. And that worked until the Ukrainians realized what was going on. And then they figured out ways to let people come in and then make sure that they got no reinforcements. And then they had to leave for no want of supplies. Or they simply were destroyed in place. So Russia has demonstrated the ability to adapt, but Ukraine continues to have the operational edge. So that's what I expect to see in the battle space. That could change for the worse if Western support diminishes. That could be in the form of the U.S. not allowing arms to be sold to the European allies to go to Ukraine. But so far, that's not happened. And that could also happen if the money dries up from Europe. But I don't think that's going to happen either. And the decision made on that loan, a month or two ago, is indication that's not going to happen. And globally, if the war on the shadow fleet continues the way it's been going since Venezuela, that's that much faster the Russian economy's pressure could lead to something significant. But again, it's very hard to tell when that point of significance comes.
If Ukraine in any sort of peace deal is forced to give up any territory, and I include Crimea as part of that, and given the rhetoric that's come out from President Trump with his, I want to own Greenland, and now he's backed down from that. We don't know the detail of what any deal is that's in there. But what sort of message do you think that's sending to Xi Jinping over Taiwan?
Well, of course, people in Russia and China and other authoritarian spaces all talked about the quote-unquote hypocrisy of the United States and the West as Trump was talking away about Greenland. And I hate to say it, but that was not an unfair shot. But it's also true the comparison is limited because the Russians sent soldiers into Crimea and they now control it. Trump huffed and puffed, but he did not actually try to blow the house down. So that's an important distinction. We don't know the nature of that deal, but so far there's no indication that as a result of this episode, the United States has gotten more than it would have gotten if it just asked Denmark to begin with.
So another example of President Trump huffing and puffing. But at the end of the day, President Zelensky spoke of a dignified end to the war. But realistically, what would a dignified end look like to you?
Well, at the risk of repeating myself, because I've been saying this since before Trump took office after he won the election, Trump's goal is a durable peace, right? Not a just peace. And he's always spoken about, or rather his team, for months before our election, 2024, were talking about the elements of such a deal that included roughly an ending to the fighting along the current lines. That included massive armament of Ukraine to deter further aggression. That included European troops on the ground in Ukraine to deter further aggression. And it's amazing how we've seen those ideas crystallizing in the negotiations between the U.S. and Ukraine. And of course, but you have to add to that mix something Zelensky annoyed Trump with in the Oval Office, which was security guarantees. And to Zelensky's credit, he got Trump to offer security guarantees when they met in Florida 4 weeks ago. So those are the outlines of a deal. The only problem, of course, is they're unacceptable to Putin because Putin wants control of Ukraine. And even Trump has acknowledged that may be Putin's objective. Of course it's his objective. But Zelensky, in more or less agreeing to these terms a while back, was signaling he would accept a deal which leaves Russia in occupation of Ukrainian territory, but only on a de facto basis. And he has pushed back hard. And many American foreign policy experts have pushed back hard against the notion of recognizing de jure Russian aggressive uh, control of Ukrainian land.
And finally, do you think if Vladimir Putin is given any concessions whatsoever, and include territorial concessions in that, he will then just use that to go and lick his wounds, learn the lessons from what went wrong in this part of this phase of the battle in Ukraine, and then come back for another salami slice at some stage in the future, whether it be Putin or Putin 2, whoever takes over from him in the future?
I don't have any doubt that that's what's on Putin's mind now. And conceivably, he would agree to a deal if Ukraine, foolishly, at American insistence, gave Putin those fortified positions in western Donbass that his troops have been unable to take. And frankly, since Trump is offering Zelensky security guarantees, that's foolish for American forces, because we'd have to deal with the results of Russia's military in a much greater position in Ukraine. So Putin's not going to get that.
On that note, I hope Steve Witkoff and President Trump are listening, because it's giving them real insights as to the reality of what they should be doing and what would happen in the future. But Ambassador John Herbst, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today once again on Frontline.
My pleasure. Thank you.